How are you doing? Good. Sounds like 4. Okay.
No, it was 4. Cowboys are worth 9. Is it?
I'm good. My mom.
The reality though, these teams are worth a lot of money because there's a scarcity value.
Okay. Yeah. That'd be great. Hello, everyone. Can people online hear me? Can someone come off mute and let me know?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order here at 3:01 p.m. And let's see, Ken Levine has volunteered to act as secretary. Ben volunteered to act as secretary for the meeting, so gratitude for him, so I don't have to do dual duty this time. I'm going to go through the roll call here. George Savage, I'm here. Stephen Pisani.
Yep.
All right. Ken Levine.
Yes.
Lucy Neely.
Here.
Jason Pressman.
Yes. Here.
Michelle Takai.
Here.
And Bill, are you online? Bill Urban. Okay. Listen, Bill. He is supposed to be joining online, so we will look for him later on. So that's a roll call. We have a quorum, so that's great. And we're just waiting on Bill to join since he's got one of the agenda items for today, but we'll get to that. Moving on to oral communications for items not on the agenda. Anyone have any comments? Yes, in the back. Sorry. Yeah, should be. Yeah. Wait, can people online hear Karen?
No, we cannot.
Okay, we'll fix that. Karen Askey is going to be speaking. No.
Hi. So as we're looking for ways to increase town revenue, I would like to request that the Finance Committee review and perhaps request a study session on parking fees for both Rosati's and Ford Field. Simply put, our pricing structure is outdated. We currently charge $100 per day for the entire use of the Ford Field lot, yet we, the town, were charged $800 by Christ Church just next door to rent its lot for town picnic parking. There's a discrepancy here. With respect to Rosati's, my understanding is that the town leases about 100 spots to the Alpine Inn, and that lease has not been updated in over 10 years, maybe 15, and it predating the new and improved Zot's restaurant. Looking forward, proposed development and projects will also increase the need for parking in town. As we look for ways to increase our revenue, we should be looking at this opportunity and update our fee structures. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Karen. Any other comments from the public for items not on the agenda? Oh, yes. Oh, wow. Rita. Yeah, okay. Rita's been recognized here in the building, and I see a couple of people have their hands up online as well. We'll get to you.
Rita Comas-Whitney, thank you for taking my comment. And while we're looking at cost cutting, cost saving and where the money is, I hope that there is a review by the town, by an outside group or something on the contracts that the town currently has. And if there's going to be an ad hoc committee with the community, I'd gladly be part of it. But I think that's long overdue, not just our financial audits, but to have an audit of our reviews. And a lot of different towns have been doing the audits of their contracts recently and have found, including Palo Alto on some of the businesses that we work with in town, to find that there needed to be some updates and they were not compliant. So I think that's a real opportunity for cost savings and to see how the money is actually being spent and why.
Okay, thank you. Other people here in the room? Comment? Okay, we'll move online. I see Dave Cardinal has his hand up. David?
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me now or see me now.
Wow, yeah.
Is that working?
Well, we just have to turn the volume down a little bit in the room here because you're distorting. Try again.
Okay, I'm super loud, so that's probably why. Yeah, I have a question and a couple comments about how the town finance committee, their role in town governance. My question is whether there's some sort of dotted line management relationship that allows volunteer committee members, like of the finance committee, to basically give orders to our town staff. Or if our staff works for the town manager who works for the town council, who then set their priorities, in which case, to avoid chaos, I think direction and priority should come from their actual management chain or things get chaotic or confusing. My first comment is that if the finance committee thought our town staff didn't have the correct priorities, it seems like the correct response would be for their liaison, Judith Haskell, and other dissatisfied but silent until recently members of our town council to bring that issue up and vote to reprioritize what our finance department is working on. As far as I know, that never happened. I listened to far too many meetings, but I never saw anybody saying, hey, this is more important and we should do this. And if they think that, they should have said that a long time ago. I'm also not sure whether the subcommittee of one's proposal is totally legal under California law. There's rules about how communities invest their money. I don't think the subcommittee report included any lawyer input, attorney input. I don't think it included any metric of whether it would withstand legal scrutiny. I just want to ask that. And my second comment is related. Our town staff works for our town council. That's how it works. If members of our town council have an issue with the priorities or the performance of our town staff, they should address that directly or through our town manager. That's their job. Those are their employees. They sending out random huge emails to other people whining. I've managed organizations for 40 years, but that's not how you manage people. It's wrong.
If I can just interrupt a little bit, David, this is supposed to be for items not on the agenda, and you're referencing an item that is on the agenda. So we should be able to get to that in due course. In terms of the one comment I will address that you made, our role here, the role of the Finance and Audit Committee is to advise the town council, and we work with staff to advise the town council. Town council sets policy, town staff implement it. So that's the goal. And we're going to get to the town cash investment policy stuff later on.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, thank you. There's a hand raised, which I only have a phone number for, so apologies. I don't know your name. It's 650-400-3056.
That's me, George Dana Breen.
Okay. Hi, Dana.
George, this is kind of directed to you. A lot of us are trying to get to the 4:00 general plan meeting. And so, we really want to be in this meeting, but if you guys could be as efficient as possible, it would be really great to be there and listen. Thank you.
Yes, all right. Dana. I will try not to be dilatory and I'll save all of my homespun stories and we'll try to click through the agenda as quickly as we can, Dana, and getting out of here would be great. All right. So anybody else? There's somebody else, another phone number that is 650-269-7017. Can you identify yourself and tell us what's on your mind?
George, this is Bill Urban. Just want to let you know I joined the meeting just as Rita was speaking.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Good to have you here.
Sure.
That's great. Okay. Seeing no other oral communications for items not on the agenda, we'll move to announcements. And the announcement that I want to start off with is to welcome our new town manager, Sharif Etman, who's seated here to my left. And yeah, please. I just want to welcome you here and tell you how excited we are to have you joining us. Many of the comments that you'll hear today and a lot of the consternation, including what Dave was just saying, related to us being without a town manager for a large number of months. It felt longer than it was, but it's really great to have you here, and just wonder if perhaps you could just tell us a bit about your background and just introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And one of my first executive decisions was to get new microphones. So you're going to see new microphones. They're actually in that room and we're testing them this week. So I figured I'd start off with some of the easier pieces. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for the warm welcome. I am Sharif Etman, your new town manager. You'll hear me say this probably a couple times today and tomorrow. I'm 3 weeks in, right? So give me some time. I'm very happy to be here. I'm familiar with Portola Valley. I've been a San Mateo and County executive for many years. Dating back, I'm an LA kid. I grew up in West Covina and South Pasadena. South Pasadena is 3 square miles. Very familiar with small town. And I moved up to the Bay Area about 20 years ago. I started out as a director of finance for the Oddfellow Rebecca's Children's Home in Gilroy. So I was their chief financial officer. I started my career as a financial analyst, basically, and then worked my way up to CFO of the Children's Home. I then was director of finance for San Mateo County. So very familiar working with San Mateo County. I was the director of finance for Human Services Agency, 850 employees, $200 million. And then from the San Mateo County director of finance, I worked for 3 different cities. I worked as finance manager and director of finance and admin services director, which is basically director of finance, HR, and IT. For the city of Los Altos and Redwood City as a consultant or contractor for the past 1.5 years. So finance is my background. Finance is my blood. I know enough about everything else to be dangerous, right? Being the one that finances all the different pieces. And so this appealed to me to apply for Portola Valley, knowing the assistance that we need and the finances. And I'll save that for the next agenda item to talk about what my priorities are, what I've noticed, what I've seen, and where I'd like your support moving forward. But I'm very excited to be here. Portola is a beautiful town. I have personal links to Portola. I bring my boys here to hike and to bike and all that good stuff. I do live in San Jose, and so just looking forward to partnering with you all, and just thank you all for your help so far. So,
well, great. Well, speaking for the committee, we're very excited to have you on board as well, and love the fact that your background is certainly going to be put to use here as we work through our issues, which compared to the things you've done in your past should not be really that much of a challenge. Great. So we will now move on to item 4, which is approval of the minutes from July 25th. I just wonder if everybody has read the minutes and whether there are any corrections or whether I hear a motion to approve. Yeah. In favor? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. That was quick. Moving to item number 5, new business. When I took over the chair role from Lucy early in the year, I guaranteed that the audit status would be the #1 agenda item every meeting. So that's why it's here at 5A. I'd like to propose, however, that we address it in the context of item 5B. So we proceed immediately to talk about the town manager's finance-related priorities, have a discussion of how he's assessing the challenges in the town holistically, one of which is, of course, getting caught up on the audits, and get that all in context. And then we, of course, will have input from members of the public and the discussion by members of the committee here on this as the big agenda item, and then we'll get to 5C, cash investment policy subcommittee report to follow. So with that, Sharif, just wondering, hand it over to you to talk a bit about how you're assessing the state of the town at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I have some prepared pieces I'd like to talk about. First of all, obviously when interviewing for any position, you look at the finances, you look at the reserves, you look at the financial statements, right? And all the different pieces, you look at the audit. And what was clear to me when I was applying was how we were behind as a town on our audit and our reserves and our financial statements and different pieces, right? And so that was one thing that I brought up in my interview, is how I feel like I could be a strength to the town to get us caught up on our audits, on our year-end close, bring up our financial statements and different pieces. And then as I was reviewing the town structure and the different pieces, what was very striking to me even before I started was how you have literally one employee working in finance, and that's Cindy. And so we are lucky to have Cindy here. Cindy has been a trooper through all of this. To be an employee of one, to be the director of finance, and to be entering journal entries and making stamps and making copies and doing all the different pieces is unheard of. And so I just want to recognize Cindy in public for all the work she's done. And you can only do so much as one human, as one employee. And so when she had a tech for some time and an accountant for some time, and those people came and went, there's only so much you can do. And so that's literally keeping the lights on, keeping the bills paid. And for that, I commend Cindy. And so my approach with Cindy since day one was, I'm here to support her, I'm here to support the department, and to get the resources that we need, because clearly something has to change. In order to get caught up, you can't have one employee, you can't have one director of finance. Your Boy Scout troop, your campsite, your whatever it is, you have more than one employee. My PTO for my son has more than one finance person managing the PTO, right? So that was very clear. And so Cindy and I have been in lockstep since day one, basically looking at what we need, what resources we need to have, and the different pieces. And so when my discussions with council, and then even in my interview, is that one of my number one goals is to get our house in order, because we cannot make decisions on the sheriff's contract, on emergency planning, on our housing element, on anything that we're doing without having solid financial data. I need to be able, as your town manager, make an educated decision and recommendation to town council based on what we're doing on our finances. So when you're talking about an $800,000, $900,000 increase to the sheriff's contract, when you're talking about the housing element, everything we do has a fiscal impact. I know that us being finance, we're biased to say, well, everything's about finance. Well, it has an impact. And so I'm looking forward to actually putting a fiscal impact to the housing element. For every month we don't have a housing element for the town of Portola Valley, it's going to cost us money. It's X amount of dollars, whether it's $10,000, $15,000, and town council and the community needs to be aware of that. Any decision that we make that we push down the line affects our reserves, affects our fund balance at the end of the year. And so I'm looking forward to working with Cindy and our staff to be able to have the equipment, the resources, the reporting to be able to make those decisions. And so that was number one for me. You can't operate as a town and expect to get a parcel tax. I'm being very blunt. A parcel tax and tax increase, anything with the community, until your audits are in order, until you show to the town that we are audited, we are correct in our financial statements, and here's why we need money, right? And so the audit piece, the reporting piece, that's number one. That's number zero, if you will, on getting our finances in order. And so Cindy and I have made a lot of great strides just in the last couple of weeks to make this a priority. And I feel I have the council support. And obviously staff is under my purview as town manager. We have a senior accountant starting tomorrow. There's been discussion about a second senior accountant for quite some time. They're literally starting tomorrow with the town of Portola Valley. So we'll be 2 senior accountants strong in finance. We also last week have hired a finance technician to come and do all the busy work and the technician work that needs to be done, so we can free up the senior accountants to do more of the reconciling and the year-end close and all the different pieces. Just last week, I was in Sacramento and I met with many of my colleagues from all different facets of the state. And I've hired an outside company to come and help us do an internal finance review and basically attach hours to all of the things that we need to do. And so these are folks that I've worked with for many years through my networking to be able to come in and provide us with a report that says, in order to close out your year end, you need this amount of hours. In order to do this, you need this amount of hours. In order to do this, it's going to take you this amount of time. And then I can make the determination that if that's too long, then we need to increase our resources. Maybe that means going back to council to ask for more resources, and then making sure that we have the staff internally to get us caught up, because we can't go into next calendar year, next fiscal year, being behind 2 years on our our audit and our year-end close. So number one priority, finish our 2 audits, get caught up on year-end close, and then get our budget, our actual to budget reports in order. And so that's a priority of mine. That's always been a priority of Cindy's, but you can only do so much based on the staffing. And as you all mentioned in the very beginning, it's been very clear, it's very difficult, a town of this size, not to have a town manager. So I've made a lot of decisions in the last week or 2 or 3 that I wouldn't typically make if we had someone that was, if I was taking over for someone that had just retired, for example, or, passing the torch on. So it's clear that the town needed a manager just on the simple day-to-day operations and things that we're doing. So that's kind of my main focus in the last couple of weeks, was really diving into that piece. And as we look at the other departments, it's not just finance. It's clear that, and I've used these buzzwords before, you'll hear me again, that the town really needs a reset and a refocus. It's very hard to work in a town with only 15 employees. And right now, I think we're down 5 staff. And so you're at 60% capacity and probably a 60 or 70% turnover. So I feel it's probably going to get a little bit harder before it gets better, because we got to bring our staff on board and really need the community to understand that as well. And I'm only as strong as my staff. I'm only as strong as my team. As much as I would love to dive into the finances and get into every journal entry and close out the books, I can't, right? Because I'm town manager, and that's where Cindy and her staff are going to come in. And so those are my biggest priorities. And as we get better, faster, stronger on these pieces, then we can look under every rock and perform those different reviews. There's been discussion about looking at every contract, looking at every piece. We have to do that as a town. So it's not just our contract, it's where we spend our money, where is it going, what consultants do we use, what events do we have, all those different pieces, because I need to be able to uncover every rock so that we can come back to the town and say, you know what, we've done our due diligence, we're caught up on our finances, we've uncovered every rock, and now we need money. And this is the money that we need, right? To put it bluntly, this is the dollar amount that we need in order to move forward. And so I feel confident we can get there. I know we can get there as a group and with everybody's support. It's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy, but we can get us caught up. And then we can be confident in what we're asking to the community. I have no problems asking the community for money, just making sure we do it when we're comfortable and make those decisions based on our reporting and what we have. Along with that, one of the first things is I'm very familiar, as with any finance director in San Mateo, Santa Clara County in the state, with LAIF funding and all the different funding streams that you've talked about. I saw within 5-10 minutes of looking at the reserves that we had too much money in LAIF. And that's a common problem amongst many different cities, is that you get comfortable putting it in a safe place, right? And Starla has mentioned this, we've all talked about this. The number one goal of finance directors is safety, right? Above liquidity, above yield. And so safety first, then liquidity, and then yield. And so you want to be able to pull that money out tomorrow if you have an emergency, as opposed to waiting or having fees attached to it in those different pieces. But it was clear for the town of Portola Valley that we had a little bit too much in LAIF, and we want to maximize that revenue. And that's where Bill Urban comes in. I want to thank Bill for all his work and all his time. He's been very emphatic about, we're losing money month after month. And I've certainly made that same argument. When I was in Los Altos, my first headline in Los Altos was, the town needs to spend money, because we had money sitting in LAIF and sitting in reserves, and the cost of construction was 6, 7, 10%. So you need to build your community center now, because 2 years from now, it's going to cost you 20% more, right? And so the money in the bank, you're actually losing value on. And so that message was not lost on me. India certainly prioritized that, but at the same time, when you're basically keeping the lights on, trying to pay the bills, things get pushed to the side, unfortunately. And so with the work that Bill's done, with the work that you've done as a team, literally, you may have seen that tomorrow on town council agenda is a check for $1.1 million. That $1.1 million is for Charles Schwab. And to show you how it does take time for all these things to happen, Charles Schwab was here 2 hours ago in our town hall getting my signature, right? Because you can't transfer the money without my signature as town manager. And so things are finally moving, we're getting things done. And I think that, we're gonna get stronger and faster as we move forward. So the biggest piece now is council will now know that we're committed to maximizing our revenue, maximizing the funds that we have in the bank, and getting a better return on the dollar by having this $1 million with Schwab as opposed to LAIF. And so I was certainly very committed to getting that done sooner than later. And there's been a lot of, there's a lot of inner workings of getting a wire transfer and not doing a wire transfer and all this. This is a good old fashioned check, right? We're going to check FedEx overnight, get it done. But even that check, it's going to take them a week for them to process my name and get into the system. And so things take time, unfortunately. But I wanted to publicly thank Bill Urban and the Finance Committee for all your work and your commitment to making sure that we do recognize those different pieces. Let's see what else. if I miss anything. And so basically that was my report for today, just to introduce myself, introduce my commitment to the finances of the town, along with everything else that we're doing. But it's clear that, you know, we need a reset, refocus. You heard that from me over and over. And, you know, with change and turnover comes opportunity. I'm looking forward to hiring the right people in the right spot. Another thing, to be blunt, that's been very clear for me, being a, you know, call me a, I don't want to say old, say veteran city employee, is that the lines have been blurred here over time between committee and council and manager. And I'm looking to very quickly reestablish some of those lines, because we all need to be very clear on our roles and what we need to do. And I'll remind the community and council. Council has 2 employees. They only have 2 employees. It's the city manager and the town attorney. Those are the 2 people that report to council. All the rest of the staff, all of the contracts, they report to me as town manager. So if someone has an issue with an employee, someone has an issue with a contract, someone has an issue with the performance, that's my performance eval. That goes to me. And so that's on council to come to the town manager and say, hey, this isn't working, right? And that goes to me as town manager as opposed to directly to an employee. And so without going into detail, this is not just what's happening today on today's agenda. It's happening in all the different committees. And so we need to go back to everyone kind of staying in their lane, being in their lane, and being responsible for, you're an advisory committee versus you can tell folks what to do versus you're the actual policymaker, right? And this happens with council as well. Council's job is policy and budget. And I'm here to take them out of the weeds and take them out of the mucky muck that you don't necessarily want to do as a council member. That's my job as town manager, is to manage staff, manage the contracts. And at the end of the day, my job is to execute their priorities, right? So my priorities, staff's priorities, and council priorities should be the same, right? They should all line up. When you ask, if you stop someone in the street, what's your priority? They should all match up. And so we kind of have to get back to that. And so I'm literally talking about having pieces of paper, and we pass it out to the groups and say, committees, here's your role. Council, here's your role. Sharif, here's your role. And making sure that that's clear, because it's been lost and it gets frustrating. And I see the passion and the commitment and everything that we're doing, and it just gets lost in translation with some of these pieces. So I'm here to remind folks of that. I'm not shy. You can tell I'm outgoing, and I'll be very happy to remind us of kind of what our roles and responsibilities are. But at the same time, I'm one person and I need help to execute this. And I'm very excited to kind of do a refresh here. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do moving forward. So
that's great. Thank you. For the introduction on that. Now, I just want to comment on the one thing you mentioned about roles and responsibilities. I agree that having clear-cut roles and responsibilities is really helpful in any organization when there's willingness on that. It often expresses itself as interpersonal conflict, which is not helpful, not appropriate, and it isn't the actual problem. The actual problem is somewhere else. And sometimes it's where people aren't clear on who should be doing what and how. And I want to add my thanks to yours from earlier for Cindy for all the work you've done with the committee, with the staff, with everyone, just keeping everything running during some very difficult times since last March. So thank you for that. I'm really looking forward to things heading in a positive direction from here. But what I'd like to do to start with is open this up to questions from the committee. And Bill, feel free to open your mic. And I know you're online at the moment, but committee members only, and then we'll hear from the public afterward. Questions, comments?
Yeah. So Cindy, did we lose? At the last meeting, my impression was that we had 2 financial analysts lined up. Did they both quit?
Yes, so we did have a senior accountant that we did convert from the temp agency that we had already been working with since the end of April. So that was one senior accountant. We had made an offer to the second senior accountant to begin August 15th. They originally accepted the offer for employment and then decided to take back the offer and stay at their current employer. So then we had to then turn around and begin our recruitment process again, more interviews. And then we did bring back someone else for an additional interview and did extend the offer to them, which that person will be beginning tomorrow. And they come with some local government experience from Half Moon Bay, So they are seasoned and ready to get started and working.
These are full-time, not temporary. Okay. And were both of you involved with the recruiting and interviewing of these new hires?
The recruitment of the senior accountant was before I arrived, but I certainly vetted it and saw that person's more than qualified. And then, so we have 2 full-time senior accountants. You have a full-time director of finance. We have a full-time temporary contracted finance technician, right? So we have someone from a temp agency, but they will be here full-time. That's the intent to have a full-time as a technician. And then in the future, based on this, you'll hear my buzzwords, the reset, refocus, is really taking a look at what positions we need in finance to be able to make sure that we can keep that train moving in the right way. And so I fully expect that there'll be some sort of tech level position for the town of Portola Valley, because you really want your senior accountants doing senior accountant work. I want our finance director doing finance director work and getting out of that piece. So kind of to be continued, but this is kind of like the core staff for now. And then with this outside firm helping us to shore up all the hours that we need, then we'll be able to identify what further resources we need. And I have fully prepped and talked with council to let them know, don't worry, I'll be back to talk about resources for not only finance, but also the needs of the town.
So are we getting an audit status later then?
Well, this is where we should be getting this now. If you have, I guess if I were to summarize, the question would be, what do we know? Understanding that you arrived really, Sharif, about 5 minutes ago, where are we actually tactically in the audits and when will we know more?
Yeah, I'll give that to Cindy to answer. And the answer is now that we have the second senior accountant and having that person solely focused on year-end close and the audit. And so.
Thank you. So yes, at the last meeting, we had discussed bringing on that second senior accountant, and we had based that staffing along with the schedule that we had outlined and presented to the finance committee. Because we did not attain that second position, that second senior accountant, we could not focus on the items that we had outlined essentially. So we did focus on the fiscal year 22-23 year-end close, and we're working on those just to stay current. But we still will continue to move forward. And then through the firm's analysis that Sharif will be bringing in, we plan to reevaluate the dates and the plan that we had presented along with their recommendations, the firm's recommendations, timing, and milestones.
And when do we think, just ballparking, that firm will be able to fit us in and give us that information?
We'll be meeting with them on Thursday and Friday of this week.
And then you'll figure out what their work plan is.
Yeah. So part of it is like, we don't know what we don't know, right? So time was of the essence, and I wanted a company to come in now as opposed to waiting 2 or 3 months from now. So they're literally coming Thursday and Friday to sit with Cindy and with our senior accountant to talk about where are you at in the year-end close, where are you at with your audit, and looking at what we need. And let's give an example. If the firm says, well, based on your staffing, it's going to take you 3 months to get caught up, as an example, then that is where I, as town manager, can be able to say, well, 3 months is too long. So what would it take to get us caught up in 6 weeks? Well, in order to do 6 weeks, because they did their hourly analysis, well, we need someone here for 40 hours for the next month, right? And so that's where, depending on what the answer is on some of these pieces, if something's going to take 4 months and we wanted to get done in 2 months, as an example, I'm going to bring in more resources. And so once we have this overall plan of what we need for the GAN limit, what we need for year-end close, what we need for the audit, what we need to get our accounting system to actually have the actuals built in, right? And what hours those are attached, then I can come back and say, okay, we have enough money under my purview to ramp these up tomorrow, or I'm going to go back to council and ask for more resources to get this from 4 months to 2 months, or 6 months to 1 month, those kind of pieces. So we don't quite know what that entails yet. That's why we want the analysis to tell us it's going to take you 80 hours of a senior account time to accomplish this. Okay, well, what will it take to get it done sooner? Right? It might be a third senior account, getting a temporary third person. There are plenty of folks out there that have firms that you can have a temporary person to come in, right? And so that's what we want to evaluate what the ask is first, and then we can come back and say, okay, based on what we know, based on the staff that we're going to have or the extra resources, we're going to finish 21-22 audit on this month, and by this date, and by this date, and have that brought back and be able to go that route.
Just a question, I guess, for Cindy is our software behaving now? I know we've had some issues between the old accounting system and the newer accounting system. How is that working for you?
There are still components that are not fully integrated with some of our other systems, so there still is a lot of manual work. But we are planning to implement new processes that should be able to make those processes more efficient. So we continually still work with OpenGov. I have a meeting with them also tomorrow. And we meet regularly just to talk about their project plans and how they are planning to incorporate some more of this data integration between the different platforms.
Okay, but problems aren't going to be holding you up on the software front. It's just a question of going for further automation over time.
Yes, yes.
But there's still the issue of the actuals, like the two budget systems, the budget system and the general ledger system. They don't talk to each other, right? And so we don't have a budget column that can be automatically inputted. And so Cindy and I are in conversation of literally like, what if we need to go old school? How many hours would it take for someone to literally type in line by line? Fortunately, I've done that before. And Portola Valley is not that large, but maybe that's something we need to do, is take a week, but it can't be Cindy, can't be the two senior accountants, right? But literally add, this is 100,000, the budget's 150, this is that. If that's what it takes to get us there this time, that's fine. And then on the political side, I'm pulling my newbie card wherever I can. I went to the OpenGov booth in Sacramento. This is a public meeting, so they can hear me. I put them on the spot and said, hey, I'm your new town manager for Portola Valley. We have the OpenGov system. The two systems don't talk to each other. What's going on? We need help, right? And then they, oh, yes, okay, we need your help. Okay, well, part of the conversation is maybe you guys owe us and maybe assign someone to help us put the numbers into the system, right? Yeah, and so whatever it takes to kind of get us there. But the punchline now is we're too far in that we can't have a blank, column. And so what is it going to take to get there? Whether it's OpenGov themselves, whether it's hiring someone to actually type in the numbers, or maybe we contract with someone to put that in there, or it's an increase for something. But the punchline is now we got to have that column in there. So
and figure out a long-term solution. And
yeah,
maybe it's not OpenGov if they can't fix it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then Cindy's also been mentioning about like our payroll system. There are other systems that don't talk very well with OpenGov. Maybe it's time to look at a new system, right? And the different pieces. And so it's nice to say, it's easy to talk about. Obviously, all the stuff, will cost money at some point, and it also takes staff time. And so you can't have your director of finance on the phone with OpenGov for 3 hours, right? She was on the phone last week for 3 hours talking to OpenGov. That's not the best use of our director of finance's time when we have all these other priorities. And so we just got to get out of that piece.
Other comments, questions from the committee?
I have a question. This is for Cindy or potentially other committee members. As a relative newbie on the committee and paying attention to town finances, what has been the you just described the current staffing level and the goals for the staffing level. What's been the historical norm of staffing in the finance department? I mean, some of you have 30 years to draw upon to answer that.
Sure. So essentially beginning around 2015, there was a transition from an admin services manager to a finance director. Previous to that, the admin services manager was more of a part-time, usually about 30 to 35 hours a week. But there were some other staff dedicated for assistance within the finance department. So we had like an admin assistant. I also, as the office assistant, would also assist. So there were other staff who was also available for the data entry and some of more of the admin work. And at the time, the town manager also had a stronger role with the budget preparation. Through the years, that has definitely changed. The budget has become more of a responsibility of the finance director. Also, all of the data that we did, or the technology that we did, the software that has been implemented over recent years. So that was never evaluated or any analysis done as far as the impact on staff. So while we did bring in software to help, there is a lot more maintenance also required of those different components. And many of those systems we did bring on due to COVID because we did not have the capability. There were many functions that we had that were so manual. You would come into town hall to perform any type of business. It was not services that were available online. So we did bring a lot of new technology, a lot of new software due to COVID. So really that impact, we really saw what that has done as far as staffing in the recent years.
And the two senior accountant roles they're for 3-year contracts. So the staffing plan is for at least that long.
One of the senior accountants is on a 3-year term basis. So at that 3-year end, we would then reevaluate and determine if there would be a need to have 2 senior accountants, or what that staffing level would be for specific for the finance department.
Just to speak to that, finance has changed so much, especially in the last 10 years in government. The amount of regulations, the amount of restrictions, the amount of things that CalPERS puts on us, that the state of California puts on us. There used to be seasons in finance. You used to have a budget season and used to have, an audit season. Now it's just nonstop. You're in constant budget season, you're in constant audit. I can think of we're probably at 6 or 7 audits a year that happen as opposed to one big one. And so things have certainly changed over time. And I'm a big proponent of basically in any department structure, but especially in finance, you have to have that technician level. You have to have your expert level, which is the accountant, right? And then you have to have some sort of analysis with manager, director. And so that's where I joke when you talk about, whether it's your PTO or whether it's a multi-million-dollar company, you have technicians, you have middle experts that do the real work and understand the regulations and things that apply. Then you have your analysis and your director, manager level. And that's what I think is lacking here, is we don't have those 3 levels clearly outlined. Because you have a director of finance that does tech work. You have a technician that's not here. You have an accountant that's doing other pieces. And so really getting back to that. And so same thing with building and planning or with anything else. You have folks that are technicians. You have folks that are the experts that actually review the plans. And you have a director. And so I do think we need to get back to that moving forward. But yeah, it hasn't been easy in finance. And finance has gotten more and more complicated, more and more restrictive. And myself, I am not an accountant. I happen to be good at finance. I happen to understand well how finances work. I've been doing this for 30 years. So I myself make sure that we have a strong accountant on board, right? Whether they're a certified CPA or an accountant level. And so you'll see many towns have that same model. You have a finance director, then you have very strong, competent accounting staff, then you have obviously the technician work. And so one of the things that we're evaluating is how to get that to a level here that we can make. And I don't think anyone's going to argue. I've seen nothing but nodding heads in every meeting I've been to. But an organization of this size, dealing with millions of dollars, to have 2 staff is just not working, right? And that clearly needs to change. So, and then you have the piece about getting caught up and all the other pieces to get there. So, and government accounting is so different than regular accounting, as you all know, with the hybrid model that we use. And then you also have just the nuances of how government works. It is very different. Even myself, coming from a director of finance at the county, I thought city government was similar. It is very different. And it takes a big learning curve to come from a county level to a city level and the way we handle our finances. So.
Other committee comments, questions? I'll open it to members of the public here in the room. Yes, Rita? Yeah, it's okay. Just
run the pickup.
Join us.
The petite baby. He's taller than me now. But the question is that over the years, there have been maybe not just a few employees, but several consultants, contractors, such as Jim, which was, yes. And so what about them? Are they still part of the department? Talking just from what we see from the cheap seats. I'm not in there in the department seeing who's here or not, but I've been attending all of the finance meetings and I see who's on the screen, who shows up during the budget. And we have this young lady over here that's also part of it. So, Cindy, I appreciate everything that you've done, but there are other people that the town has paid for to do that work or hope to be doing that work in that department. So would you be able to reflect on how many of those people are currently still contracted, employed by the town, even if they're not full-time staff? And compared to last year or the year before, because we actually don't get to see those numbers, because when we look, it's not broken down by, we just see sometimes we see the contract saying that these people have been hired, but we don't see, except sometimes on Zoom, that these people still exist, that the community is paying for. So how many people are there now? How many people were there last year? And when I did ask about the audits in the past, even though I was told that it wasn't being done because Jim didn't have time to do it. So what are the other people that we're paying for responsible for? If we're then managing them, not we as in the community, but now Sheree is managing them. So please, the community definitely wants to hear that answer, and then I'll listen to it in the car.
Thank you. And Bill, if it's okay, if we can take public comment, I'd be happy to answer it and do some all-encompassing as opposed to a discussion back and forth.
Yeah, so you want to answer at the end? Yeah, that's fine. Other comments here in the room? Seeing no hands. Oh, wait, Karen? Yeah, come on up. And I'll get to people on the phone or Zoom in a moment.
Sharif, when you mentioned that you need folks for data entry, would you be willing to take some town residents as volunteers?
Okay, and that's Karen's comment. And for those who may not have heard, Sharif will be addressing all this at the end. Online here, I see a hand raised connected to a phone number ending in 7017. You want to identify yourself and unmute?
Yeah, George, this is Bill Urban. I'm 7017. I didn't raise my hand right now.
Oh, okay.
So you're ready for my part.
Got it.
Sorry.
All right. Well,
I need to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do I need to unraise my hand by doing *9?
I think, yeah, you have to take it down or I'll probably forget and call on you again. And anyone else online have any comments on this before we proceed to the cash management topic? Okay, I don't see any hands, so thank you for that discussion. We'll now move to the town cash investment policy. And I will just remind everyone that we established a subcommittee to look into cash management. For members of the public wondering about the committee doing X, Y, or Z, I think, as Bill will explain, the town council had approved this idea of cash management along the lines that Bill will describe, and we had been providing advice through Bill on how best to do that. I'll let Bill provide his report, and then we can have a discussion. Bill, over to you. You're on mute.
Is my volume okay?
Yep, it's okay now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, George, and all of you, and Sharif. So our subcommittee, subcommittee of one, published a report, which is part of our package. It's fairly lengthy. I apologize for that. I made a point of doing a fairly detailed history of this, what we're calling the Enhanced Cash Management Project, because I learned a great deal in the process about what we were doing and what we weren't doing, and what I would call a number of oversights, some of which Sharif has already touched on and is aware of, that I was not aware of. And unfortunately, a number of them severely impacted our ability as a team, including staff, to move forward with the actual implementation of the movement of town cash from lower yielding bank accounts and LAF accounts to higher yielding money market funds in a brokerage account, which is the existing account the town has at Charles Schwab, has been open for about 5 years, currently holds about 4.6 million of town funds in 3 exchange traded bond funds considered to be long-term investments, not considered typically to this point to be part of the cash flow that we move around in order to pay accounts payable and payroll and things of that nature. This this project got its start, at least to my knowledge, back in early May. I had rejoined the committee after last year. Was not aware, hadn't been really followed what was happening with our cash levels and how they were being used, except I wasn't very much aware of what was happening in the marketplace. And when I rejoined the council, I didn't have at that time any data. I don't think the council did, or the finance committee had data on what our cash balances were, where they were held, and so forth. One of my recommendations that came out of this, which you'll read, is that we reestablish a process of having a monthly cash report that talks about our current cash, the starting balances, the ending balances, the various accounts that the money is held in, the yield, the expected disbursements during the month, the incoming receipts, and so forth. We used to have that in town many years ago. It was a report that was published online. I used to look at it regularly. It stopped being published at some point. I'd be surprised if any of us don't agree that needs to come back as soon as possible. It actually allows us to understand where the cash is. I was surprised that perhaps the Finance Committee had not much earlier in the year, even last year, raised the issue of enhancing the yield. I think part of the problem was they didn't have knowledge of the data because it just wasn't available. I had to contact Cindy in late April just to get a starting point to analyze it. Bottom line is the first 2 months of May and June, the committee did talk about this in detail, saw the value in moving our cash around to increase yields. I had done a calculation that showed that we could pick up an extra $30,000 or $35,000 per month at what are still current yield differentials between the money market funds available and the LAF and the bank account. So it was a fairly expensive cost to the town to not implement this, and it was something that we could do at no risk, maintaining the same type of safety, liquidity, security that we currently have, but with a much higher yield. I make some assertions in my report that that I felt that there was a failure to disclose clearly to the Finance Committee what wasn't being done. As George mentioned, our committee had believed that the concept of moving money in this fashion had been agreed to within the committee. We had recommended it to the finance staff. We believed they agreed with it and were moving forward with it. A couple of times they had told us they were working on the next steps, although they did not say what those steps were. We recommended it to the town council. My understanding was in June they talked about it and agreed in concept to it as well. One of the things I brought up in my report, and it touches on something I think was mentioned earlier about setting priorities and who does that and how is it clarified. It came clear to me that it's highly likely that the staff never got a clear direction from council on how hard and how quickly to move on this cash management program. And I actually asked Jeff Alps about that. I mentioned that in my report, and he couldn't actually confirm specifically they had done that either. That was probably a failure on our part somewhere within the committee and council structure. And even assuming there had been a priority, it appeared there were not enough staff resources to actually do some of the housekeeping items, I would call them, to be able to move money around. This surprised me. Before the enhanced cash management work could be done, some pretty basic housekeeping items had to be done. We had to make sure that money could be moved from account to account whenever the town needed to. We learned that we couldn't do that because we had the departed town manager still on many accounts as the only one who could authorize initiation or transfers. I learned just 3 weeks ago that the former town manager was still the only one authorized on the Schwab account, authorized to make trades. And in fact, he was still active on the account. Not that he had done anything, but he could have done something 3 months ago even though he'd been out of the town for 5 months. Even aside from the yield enhancement that we were trying to get to and we couldn't get to without the ability to move cash around, lights went off for me that, that sounded like a clear management control deficiency and an audit problem and something that ought to be clarified and corrected immediately, even aside from the fact that we needed to push ahead with the yield management process. So I think the most constructive thing that came out of this, however, is sort of uncovering that issue about making sure that we get our internal paperwork and controls buttoned up immediately whenever there's a rollover in staff. And a number of my recommendations here specifically suggest that we have 2 individuals at various levels of authorization. So if one person is gone or unable to authorize a transfer, there's always someone else available. We always have to have the capabilities of town to move money where we need to have it, when we need it. There's no end to the possible emergencies, some of which we can imagine, some of which we can't, about what we might need to do. Some of them might have to do with things going on in the town. Some of them might have to do with things happening in the financial world, as the customers of Silicon Valley Bank learned in the last 6 or 9 months. So I'm going to stop talking. I think there may be a couple of questions about things that I wrote about or that I learned, and maybe more discussion about the recommendations and in particular what Sharif might want to advocate for going forward. If I could, though, before I stop, let me address one question. I think it came up I think it may have been Dave Cardinal who asked earlier about the legal basis for the recommendation of the money market funds. That actually has been covered a number of times, even before this project started. Over 5 years ago, when we first set up the Portola Valley Investment Fund, that was the original $4.5 million that was moved over to Schwab to go into the exchange traded funds. Our town council at that time, or not council, the legal advisor had reviewed with me the government code on that, and those investments all fully complied with them. And those are short-term bond holdings. Money market funds are on the same list of approved investments that are in the government code. And when the same question came up about 3 months ago in June and July with our discussions with Starla Jerome Robinson, I also pointed out that the town's last filed audit report from 2020 had a section in the notes from our auditor that actually specifically lists what the allowed investments are under California government code, and money market mutual funds are listed right there. So that issue has been addressed several times over the years, and there's no question these are perfectly legitimate and allowable investments. So I'll keep my microphone open, but I'll stop there for any discussion, questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Bill. And I just want to point out that I mismanaged the topic somewhat, and that I didn't give Sharif an opportunity to respond to the public comment from the last agenda item when I didn't quite know what your number was. So we can find a way in the coming discussion for Sharif to respond to those earlier comments as well. That would be good. But to stay on topic and not break the flow, comments, questions from the committee.
Sharif, I missed the number you said that you had just written a check for.
1.1 million. 1.1 million. Yeah, it's on the warrant list for tomorrow's council agenda.
Out of how much? So what remains in the LAIF? Roughly.
So in the LAIF, there's still about, I want to say 13 million in that account.
After the 1.1, we have 13 million left. Why was it just the 1.1?
That was the number that was allocated when we were talking through the cash management plan with Bill Urban. So that was the number that we had designated to start with, and then reevaluate depending on the needs versus, as far as AP disbursements, payroll, any other pending items.
Yeah, so if I can add on to that, Michelle, the 1.1 million came from the fact that the target money market fund has a $1 million minimum. And so we wanted to get at least over that for the first transfer, and we could judge to make sure the transfer had gone properly, that we had been able to do the trade into the target money market fund without any problem, And once we had verified that, then we would start moving larger amounts of money behind it, immediately behind it.
So the 1 million is merely an initial amount. You're not saying that the 12 million is needed for payroll and other accounts payable?
Correct. And LAIF, we don't draw on those funds for our regular disbursements, so for payroll or for accounts payable. So that comes out of our regular checking account.
So this reminds me a lot of the process that we also used 5 years ago to fund the Portola Valley Fund. We started with a very small amount just to figure out how to do it, yes, which wasn't easy at the time, as my recollection. But we never really transferred much money after that. So in this case, I just want to make a comment that I hope that isn't repeated, and that the 12 million, vast majority, if not all of that 12 million is considered for, not only considered, but actually is moved to higher yielding return.
And I think we're all in agreement, but also keep in mind that LAIF is always going to be something that we have in our portfolio. And LAIF is almost always the largest pool, one of the largest pools of funds that all cities have. It's almost every city, I think, has LAIF. I'm looking to Starla, but every single city, you know, hundreds of cities that all pull their billions of dollars basically into this LAIF account. And so there's that fine line, that balance between what we can put into LAIF and then what we can put into the other pieces. And so being the newbie and being your finance and town manager, you know, savvy person, along with Cindy's help and with Starla, is really looking at our investment policy and keeping in mind that the investment policy for the town is very restrictive, because we have to go by California code, and that code is actually pretty restrictive. And so we have to just make sure that we adhere to that. And we are doing that now with the money that we have. But there's a balance between what's in LAIF, what we need liquid, what we need to pull literally 24 hours from now, and then what we use for our payroll. So by no means are we going to have $13 million in LAIF, but it's still going to be, there'll be a substantial amount in there moving forward. So just taking a look at what's the best plan for the town. And I'm not sure if this has been looked at in detail until recently, but this is something that's definitely on our forefront. But part of that is getting back to the basics, which was, right now we're cutting that paper check for 1.1 million to make sure it works, make sure my signature's on there, right? And then in the future, we do wire transfers, and then just becomes a normal habit. Maybe it's every quarter, maybe it's every 6 months that we actually make transfers to the Schwab account or these other accounts so that we can maximize our revenue. So this is one of many of what I would see as routine transfers, right? How many, how much, and when, that's, you know, to be discussed and to be looked at moving forward.
I'm sorry, so what's the requirement that we keep some money in LAIF?
We'd have to look, but I'm sure there's something in the town requirement. Okay, but we'll take a look at what the requirements are for LAIF. And
these institutional money markets, I'm guessing, are the equivalent of an LAIF. Yeah. Bill, is that right?
Yes, the types of holdings in the target money market fund we're talking about are virtually identical to what the LAIF holds. They both are more than 50 or 60% very short-term treasury bills that are rolling over every week, plus some CDs and repurchase obligations. It's the same kind of stuff. LAIF's yield recently has been about 2 to 2.1% less than the target money market fund. And, you know, 2% annually on 13, 14 million turns out to be a lot of money. So my recommendation specifically on LAIF was to only hold in LAIF as much as is required to meet any minimums to have an account there. I don't know what that number is, but I'm certain it's a lot less than 10 million or 5 million. There's no particular advantage to having money in LAIF over having it in a Schwab account. I think I don't know, Cindy knows this obviously, the payroll is not paid out of LAIF anyway. It's paid out of one of our banks, either B of A or TechCU, correct?
TechCU, yes.
TechCU. And our other accounts payable, I mean, I think we call it the warrant list. It's all the, you know, the amounts that are paid every month to all the vendors comes out of the same account, TechCU. Is that correct as well?
Correct.
Okay. And then receipts to the town from, property taxes or other sources, do those all funnel or received into a single account?
Yes, and that actually is deposited into our Bank of America account, the legacy account that we've held for many, many years.
Okay, so unless there's something that we've missed, there's no specific monthly inflow or monthly outflow currently that's set up to come in or out of LAIF. Is that true as well?
That's correct. So what we can do is, for this answer, is Cindy and I we've all been part of a consortium, CSMFO, which is the California State Municipal Finance Officers. And we talk about best practices and policies and procedures and all those different pieces. And what we can do is we can reach out to the consortium and ask them what's best practice, what are the other towns doing, and we can get that information pretty easily. So we can see, is it 10% that stays in LAIF? Is it 30%? What's the dollar amount? But almost every town and every city has a LAIF account. We can check and see what best practice is and what that amount is. We're all in agreement it's not $12 million, right? And we're all in agreement that money needs to be maximized. So.
And Bill, just a question for my own curiosity. If the asset mix is similar, do you know why LAIF offers lower yields the way they do? Certainly that massive difference can't be attributable to administrative overhead.
Well, there's a number of, some of it can be slight differences in mix. I think the bigger reason why the commercially available money market funds through brokerage houses are offering higher yields is because those firms are competing with each other for large, billions and trillions of dollars from investors and active traders, and they are willing. They sort of think of it as a loss leader. They like to hold their clients' cash because it becomes their trading platform for buying in and out of other things, private equity or publicly traded stocks. And they want to hold their clients' cash balances, and they're willing to cut those expenses to the bone to attract the money. And the marketplace, determines what they have to offer to get that amount. Treasury bills, short-term Treasury bills are paying over 5% themselves. You don't need to have a Schwab account, actually, to get Treasury bills. You can open up a Treasury Direct account and buy Treasury bills directly at zero cost. You do have the management of, turning over those bills and so forth. And at some point, I think there's many towns probably have the capability of doing that. We don't have the capability to do that now, but we could at some day. We don't have to pay any expense, and our yields would be as high as any of the publicly available private money market accounts. So it's really explained more than anything else by they're competing and fighting for dollars. The LAIF, I don't think, is competing for anything. I think it actually becomes a default choice by a very large number of local governments because particularly smaller towns, we don't either, historically not had on-staff investment management people who look at these types of things and make investment decisions and move money around based on them. And we clearly haven't either. So to Sherif's point about best practices, I'm not sure what the definition of best practice would be with regards to LAIF. I would say for our town, the best practice is we're certainly only going to buy those things that comply with the government code. But aside from that, and achieving safety and yield and so forth, the things that are all in the government code that we all agree with, our job should be to try to get the highest yield possible, consistent with all those things, while always ensuring we have enough money in our TechCU account, in this case, to handle both our payroll and our accounts payable on a monthly basis. I don't think it's unreasonable to see a system within several months where we would only have as much money in the TechCU account within a matter of days or a week, perhaps, before the money has to flow out to do payroll or accounts payable, and do a transfer from the money market fund at Schwab, 2 days before we want it in that account, so that it's then there only when it needs to be there, just in time inventory, if you will, to cover the dispersals. We do not need to have large amounts of money sitting in low yielding or lower yielding accounts if there's not going to be a short-term need within a matter of days or weeks for it. How close we cut that can be reduced as we get more experience doing this. We have not had a process set up to, watch the cash this closely in the past. One of my recommendations is we get to that stage. We may need some external help, a consultant, could just be me, it could be some other people, whatever. There's a number of ways to do it. Through a spreadsheet, and we just figure out, and we just look at the cash each month, and we see how much we have to move around. Many of us do that with our own personal finances now anyway. I've been doing it for at least 9 months since the rates went up so high on money market funds. And many other people do that too. It's not an overwhelmingly difficult thing to do. If you've never done it in a local government, some procedures have to be put in place to do it. But that's an eminently doable thing. It doesn't take a full-time person, spending, 6 months studying it or something. It's something that can be put together in a week or two with 1 or 2 people who are knowledgeable, spending part of their time doing that. And I will raise my hand and offer my service to Sharif and Cindy and others to start doing that, especially for the next 2 or 3 or 4 steps of moving cash after this initial 1.1 million is deposited and invested.
Yeah, so thank you, Bill. Unless I'm missing something, absent an LAIF requirement that you can only move so much, or I don't see any reason to keep any money there. Regardless of what best, regardless of best practice, I mean, that they don't have a highly experienced Bill around. We're very fortunate. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, I would guess that inertia is playing a big role here, where we had 0 interest rates for so long that I think a lot of communities just haven't really thought about it. And what a best practice might have been 2 years ago. It might be interesting. I think I'd be interested to hear what it is, but I completely agree. I think unless there's a requirement that we have money in there, if it's 200 basis points below what we could get in another secure, similarly liquid security or account, then yeah, I would minimize it in life.
I wanted to offer one more comment on that best practices because I was interested in the same thing. Some of you know, I spent a lot of time down in Indian Wells in the desert, and I actually I did not know him until about a month and a half ago. The finance director there for the town of Indian Wells, I spent some time on the phone when he was very, very generous with his time, very enthusiastic in terms of maybe having some sort of informal ongoing communication with our town. Our towns are very similar in size. We both have about 4,500 citizens, very similar demographics as well, fairly high net worth people. They're a lot wealthier than we are because they have that big Indian Wells tennis tournament, and they have 4 hotels and a big convention center. But aside from that, they look a lot like us. A lot of these things that we're talking about are things they are doing and have been doing for quite a long period of time. I actually had come up with a list of things I thought made sense to me, and when I was talking to him, he said, "Yep, that's exactly what we do." Yep, right. So these things we're talking about here for the town have been done, are being done in other places. Now, Indian Wells is probably more advanced than a lot of other towns, again, because of the funds they have, and so it's in some ways it's more important to them. But on the other hand, when you have less money, it may even be more important than that to make sure you're getting the maximum yield out of it, and especially for us with a deficit year and the big increase in the sheriff's contract, it couldn't be a better time to be jumping on this and pushing it ahead fairly quickly, fairly aggressively.
Any other comments from the committee on this point? Before I open it to comments from the public, I want to circle back and let Sharif reply to the earlier comments, if you still remember what they are. Yeah. And again, to everyone waiting for Sharif to comment, that was all my fault for interrupting the flow there.
Oh, not at all. Thank you. One of the questions was, what about the other folks that have been helping in finance department? There were some names that were specifically mentioned, like Jim Sacco. I personally knew Jim Sacco, he was a colleague of mine. So actually, our boss, dotted line at the county, or being the county finance director, budget director there. But Jim has been here since 2019, off and on, working as a contract employee and helping with the finance department. And so out of all the years that he's been here, this is the least amount of hours that he's put in the last year or so. So he's definitely ramping down. He was certainly an integral part of the town and the finances for the past 3 or 4 fiscal years. So for the lack of a better term, Jim Sacco is sunsetting out as one of our consultants here. And then also Starla Jerome Robinson has been graciously here for about 6 or 7 months helping us. And her actual role was interim town manager along with Howard, kind of advising the town behind the scenes as a retired annuitant. And Starla has a finance background, as you all know, and so she's been invaluable with her help that she's helped with the town, kind of keeping us afloat, if you will, for the lack of a better word. And so Starla's here. However, Starla's hours are limited. She's been an invaluable resource for me, kind of help pass the torch along with Howard being here, but Starla has been instrumental helping us, and her time is limited. And so literally she is sunsetting out within the next 2 or 3 weeks. And so for lack of a better term, you know, I'm here now as town manager. You have Cindy. We're looking at the other new resources, and we're looking more at the long-term permanent approach as opposed to some of these band-aids that we've had before. But we're very grateful to have Starla, and I wanted to call her out and be able to thank her for all that she's done, because she's kind of been the jack of all trades. It wasn't just finance, it was everything behind the scenes, and not only that, but also helping us keep our sanity in some of our meetings. So thank you, Starla. But that was one of the questions was, you know, what about the other folks that you see or don't see? But now it's kind of this new, what's our new model, permanent model moving forward? And then the other piece was regarding volunteers. We would love help. Certainly, we're looking at what internal folks we can have to do the help, but we'd love to tap into volunteers in other areas wherever that we can. But with this person, maybe it's something that's going to be helping with other pieces as well. But certainly, thank you for asking and offering help. And our volunteers, we're so strong here in Portola Valley, and definitely want to look at that piece moving forward. So thank you. But yeah, the real hope is have a real permanent model for finance that we can sustain and keep moving forward, so we don't have these ebbs and flows, and then we have all our levels kind of taken care of. But what's clear is this is going to be a big push first to get us caught up, get us moving forward, and then we can move on. And if I may, just what Bill has mentioned, it's all, I think we're all in agreement of maximizing our funds, doing what we can. This $1 million is kind of the test, if you will, to get the not only my signature through the transfer in, the check, make sure everything works, right? And then we'll continue to do that. I think we do that on a regular basis. And then we can certainly do our homework and see what value LAIF has, right? If anything. The biggest value that LAIF has is literally you can call them any business day and they can send you money within an hour, I believe. So it's about as liquid as you can possibly get. So there is no paperwork. It's all set up so that if there was an emergency in the town today and I need $500,000, I call LAIF and it's in my bank account within an hour. And I've personally used that many times, right? You certainly don't need $12 million for an emergency, right? So whatever that number may be, but it's literally within the hour that you call, as long as you're authorized and the bank accounts, everything's set up. So whether it was some sort of small emergency here in the town, a fire, all those different pieces, we have to certainly put that into consideration. But the rest of the funds can certainly be in different spots. And then obviously looking at our investment policy and see what works and what doesn't. But you're not going to get an argument from any of us saying we don't want to maximize our funds and get a better return on our dollars. So, and then just prioritizing that with the work that we have here. So hopefully this check that we're cutting breaks the seal and makes it easier, right, to transfer funds, where last month that wasn't possible as the town manager wasn't here or the paper wasn't right. So we'll get certainly more and more efficient as we go and try to look at what some more automatic process we can do to get there without knowing all the details and the nuances and what amounts. We can certainly work through those.
Yeah, I resonate with something Stephen said earlier about the long protracted period of 0% interest rates. I think Bill had mentioned earlier that it took our committee some months to notice, and he mentioned we didn't have balances, but of course, for nearly 14 years, it didn't make much difference to pay any attention to your cash balances. The saying was cash is trash, and so nobody really paid attention to it, to where it was. You just want to make sure you had it. So now we've returned to what would be a more normal interest rate environment where cash actually has value. And so I'm glad we're taking steps on that moving forward. And a key part of getting over the delay is now having adequate staffing, which we're just starting to get. So one person doesn't have to do absolutely everything, which means the opportunity cost of paying the bills today means you can't do all these other things. So we really appreciate that. Now, open to comments here in the room about the cash management side. We'll start with Gary. Over there, join us here in your preferred, your typical location in the past.
That's it. Yeah, right. Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to see you folks again, Ken, Michelle, and George, and Bill by phone. And also to meet for the first time some newer members, town manager as well. This is, your committee has had a special place with me through the years, ever since I was a liaison from the council. And Michelle, you were a chair for several years in a row, as I recall. And then George, you came on, and Bill and Ken, I think in that order. Anyway,
well, actually, Gary, it was a month after I moved into PV in 1995 that at the Westridge meeting, you buttonholed me and told me I had to join a committee and convinced me to join this one.
Yeah, and that was what, 27 years ago or something like that? Yeah, you told me. Anyway, that's a good lesson. If you retire from anything, a committee or anything else, you got to find a replacement. So remember that. Anyway, I've continued to be impressed with the work that you folks have done. Certainly that great work on the recent agenda, or rather the recent what's the word I'm trying to look for? The work you just did on the and impressed with you getting cutting back the expenses by a huge amount that really helped the town. So the work you have done is really impressive. I continue to be impressed with what you've done. So the bottom line, why I'm here right now, is to lend support for passing and moving on the changes to your policy, your investment policies, the MMFs and so on. And I would urge the council, strongly the council and the staff, to get cracking on getting this thing passed and in motion. Again, great to see you folks again. And we'll see more of you. And I think it's important, by the way, one last thing, to understand that the town's the town's financial status is really good. We were just talking about it a little before. There's plenty of money in the bank. So good things are still happening in this town. So keep it up. Thank you for listening.
No, thank you, Gary. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the vote of confidence. And yeah, we are very fortunate in that we have plenty of money in the bank, and the trend is not our friend at the moment, or it wasn't until Sharif arrived, and now we're getting more resource and all the stuff we need to create a new day here, which is great. So we've had a rough patch, but I think we're about through it, hopefully. Let's see. I am anybody else in the room? Yes, Betsy. And then we'll get to everyone online here in a moment.
Hello, committee members. Thank you, George. Welcome, Sharif. I'm Betsy Morgan Taylor. Nice to meet you. I am really sitting here, first of all, to say primarily first, second, and third, thanks to you all, and thanks to Bill Urban online still, I hope. Just a tremendous volunteer effort that produced this letter. This is the third meeting I've attended at which we've discussed this subject. And so the rest of what I wanted to remark upon was how we can, in the language of hospital medicine, our bench to bedside manner, how can we get cracking, in other words, to borrow Gary's language. And I thought there was an opportunity for some kind of a case study. There are more people involved in this, the idea creation and the translation of that idea into implementation that are here today and listening, and they may not be listening to the full transcript of this meeting after the fact. And I just like this information to be captured. How do we, I mean, one of the things that Sharif is going to be learning slowly or rapidly in the case of this instance is that there's incredible knowledge in our committees. And to take advantage of the resource that we have in the Bill Urban that we don't have to pay for, thanks very much, Bill and committee members, how do we take advantage of that and not push back on an idea that is, in my language, a no-brainer? How do we implement it even when we don't have enough staff? And so that is testimony to Cindy's been holding down the fort there very, very hard. Cindy earlier referenced, sometimes we have to pull in a small town like this, small staff town such as this, pull in resources from other departments. We actually are fairly top heavy relative to Woodside in admin. We have had a town manager, an assistant manager, and an assistant to the town manager. And we've hired in some other admin since then. So I think that there's an opportunity to pull more broadly. That's one idea. But I think the other missing piece is council. And so how does this committee report out at the end of meetings to council so that when we appear, as some of us did at the council meeting following your June meeting, at which we spoke at length about this idea, that there's more traction so that the directive is getting passed through. In any case, I am full of ideas, but I don't do the implementation. That's up to you. Thanks very much for listening to this piece of it. Good luck to you, Sharif, and to Cindy hiring on new competent people.
Thank you, Betsy. I will comment on one thing you mentioned, how we report out to town council, and it's primarily through our liaison, Judith, who was here, but I think she had the same 4 o'clock meeting that Dana mentioned she had to get to. And so she stepped out here, but I will catch up with her, and we tend to talk in between meetings to make certain we're coordinated. So, anyone else in the room? Okay, moving online, I see Greg, you have your hand up. This is your turn, and please give your last name.
Yeah, Greg Franklin. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great. Probably should have brought this up earlier, but very encouraging introduction to Sharif and what he's doing with the finance department. Obviously, we've got some pretty substantial commitments that we have to fulfill. I think Sharif mentioned just the burden of the changes in financial reporting that's required, but in the context of the item that he mentioned about reporting to the town council regularly on the fiscal impact of the housing element, I hope and recommend that we include a section in that of what the cost of implementing the housing element will be. This is a subject that's come up many, many times in the past couple of years as part of the dialogue over the housing element. And, you know, I think we've got a lot of CapEx and OpEx commitments that will need to be met to satisfy increasing the town infrastructure and population by up to 20%. And one example of that I think I'm worried about is, you know, these sort of what you might call unfunded consequences of the housing element. But just to give an example, you know, in the last few months, the cost of outside consultants with respect to the housing element, Urban Planning Partners, has been brought up in town council meetings, and I think in the last 3 months, they've reported out they've spent almost $600,000 on consultants over the housing element. So if you think about that in the context of our tiny population, that works out about $130 per capita for each resident of Portola Valley. And then I was sort of thinking about the costs of that at the state level, and we took $130 per capita on outside consultants for a housing element. If the state of California were faced with that, and you normalize that $130 over 39 million, this budget item of over $5 billion that they would have to meet. So this is the kind of problem that I think we have as a small community. We don't have economies of scale, but anyway, returning back to this item, I think it would be really helpful for the community to have a sense of what the cost in terms of CapEx and OpEx of implementing the housing element will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And I assume you'll comment at the end if you have any. Okay, that was to Sharif. Anybody else online? Put your hand up. Okay, I don't see anybody. So, Sharif, any comments?
All good comments. I certainly agree with everything. Cindy and I have been talking about how to, maximize things going on in finance. And just a reminder, I'll keep using my newbie card. I've been here 3 weeks, right? Getting my name on the bank account, getting my name on the door, getting my business card, right? Those kind of things. But I've certainly made some probably substantial decisions just in the last 3 weeks. It hasn't been, the honeymoon's over. And so we do have to get into the housing element, the sheriff's contract. All these pieces are not waiting for me. And one of the things that we talked about too is just the fiscal impact of everything. And I mentioned that in the beginning. And so what Cindy and I have done is, beginning on tomorrow's council meetings, is not only will we always have a fiscal impact, but literally we'll have Cindy's initials on the bottom of the council report. So every council report will have a Adobe sign of Cindy's signature and my signature, so that every council report gets run by the finance director and by the town manager. And so that no fiscal impact falls under the radar, or there's no discussion happening at a council level that hasn't been seen by our finance director. And then very quickly, we're going to be coming back to council with, you can't have it all. Not everything is a priority. And these things cost money, right? And I've already in my head started calculating what meetings are costing, what things are costing. And we'll be prepared to come back to be able to tell the community and council, for every month you don't approve your housing element, for example, it's going to cost you $15,000, $20,000. It's kind of the back of the napkin, discussion that we have. It's not a $2,000 delay. You're talking about tens of thousands of dollars for the housing element. So if you were to delay that 6 months out, does the town have the stomach or the financial wherewithal to have, $100,000, $200,000 just in this one decision? And using the housing element as an example, but the sheriff's contract, the Stanford wedge, all these things that are coming to town that we have to make decisions on. We don't have the luxury of a small town to just, kick that down the road or keep having discussions over and over, because there is a fiscal impact, and that takes money away from all these larger things that we're doing for the town. So certainly a refocus on the impact of decisions and not making decisions moving forward. So don't quote me on the 15 to 20,000, but it's a substantial number for, we've had a built-in assumption of getting the housing element done within the next couple of months. If that goes into next year, there's certainly a huge fiscal impact that the town needs to be aware of, and the council needs to be aware of.
Yeah, that strikes me as an important frame of reference of this idea of the process of making or not making decisions, and what's the structural cost of that. Yeah. And so that people can make trade-offs, right? Because it might be true that we can have anything, but we can't have everything, and not all at the same time. And so flagging that up front is really a good idea.
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What could you explain conceptually what the cost is of the delay?
So for anything, whether it's a housing element or a new project that comes to town, or anything that comes to the town or the city, you're always going to have staff costs. You're going to have the council meeting costs. You're going to have consultants. You have lawyers now in everything you do, right? So the cost of lawyers is not going away in anything that we do. And so that comes at a cost, and we have to increase the contract. You have to increase the time. And so with those different pieces, if you say this project's going to take 6 months and it's $100,000, well, then what's the cost moving forward? Then it's $6,000 every month that you don't, right? And so finances, I'd never want finances to drive what we do, but it needs to certainly be on our minds as we move forward on something so large to be like, we don't have the luxury to say, oh, we'll worry about this in the fall, or we'll take this back in February or March after the holidays. We unfortunately don't have that luxury in the town of our size to, keep these large dollar amount decisions looming moving forward. So I certainly want to help us and the community and all of us realize that some of these things are we have to have a housing element. We've established that. Projects will be coming, things will happen, and certainly we need to be at the forefront of making sure that those are to what we would like as a town. Some things we don't have a choice to do these things, but at the same time, we can't just keep fighting per se, right? Because fighting it or delaying it just for the sake of delaying it is not going to win us any favors, and then just the cost of doing that. So kind of that reality check, if you will.
That's great. We need to close out certain items so that there's fewer things to do if we expect our personnel and consulting and swing resource costs to go down, not up. Stuff that's idling around, the greater your cost.
And I have no problems with spending money, right, for the record. We have to spend money, we have to do things, but you have to do it in the context of making that educated decision. Yeah. And we are going to get to the point, and we're already at the point to say, well, if we want to spend $100,000 on X, then maybe we don't need to do Y because that's $100,000. Or maybe we need to delay this piece. And we haven't quite been there yet. We're not sophisticated yet to get there to say, well, what's the trade-off if we do this, which is that.
Other comments from the public online? Don't see any hands, which I think means we may be done. Anything else here from the committee? Other items to bring up?
And Bill, just if I may, and I don't mean to dominate, this is your meeting, your discussion, but I just wanted to say thank you for all the work that you all do in the Finance Committee. I need you. Cindy needs you. We need your help. I think we can do this together. We're in a sticky point right now. We're in a difficult time, not having a town manager, not having the staff, the turnover. These pieces are not easy. We're not going to solve them overnight, but I'm confident that we can get to where we need to be. And all of your comments, your expertise, and everything you've talked about certainly resonates with us. So just wanted to thank you for all of your time and all of your work that you've done.
Well, thank you for that. And I want to thank Bill. Thanks for calling in from the road and for all the work on the report that you did. And I want to thank Cindy for all the work you've been doing. And now, Sharif, again, congratulations and welcome. And we're just very excited to have you here and to be able to work with you in the future. And Starla as well. Yes. Thank you very much. You're still here. But thank you very much. Yeah. So without any other comments, I think we're done. So do I have a motion to adjourn? Okay, second? In favor? Okay, opposed? No. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.